What examples have you seen that show that PIV-I is catching on outside of the federal government?
Right now what I see is the adoption in higher risk areas. I can see already some of the integrators for the federal government, the defense aerospace sector, pharmaceutical sector, are really looking at how they authenticate their own employees, how do they look at things day to day, how do they leverage and be interoperable with their own supply chain. So I see these as the initial implementations. I see high risk around public safety issues. You see that with FRAC, and you see that with, if you would, authentication infusion centers. But I see right now adoption going very quickly within the risk areas.
What are going to be the first applications used with PIV-I credentials?
The very first applications that we see is, again, in this relationship between primary integrators and the federal government and primary integrators in themselves. How do they share information back and forth? How do they authenticate rapidly someone is who they claim to be? Not only physical access, but I think that this is going to rapidly move into logical access when we talk about network-to-network coordination and exchange of documents, data, email.
How do you see the adoption of PIV-I over time?
PIV-I is a suite of, if you would, technologies or capabilities. Over time, we've always adopted technologies to risk. You always have some people that want a vehicle that is affordable. You have very high-end vehicles. In this case, PIV-I is a very high-end. Okay? We want to make sure you are who you claim to be. High degrees of assurance. We also see the evolution of other pieces like OIX and Contera initiatives for lower levels of assurance. We want to manage the framework, the adoption of the framework, so trusted credentials. That you don't have to have a common credential, a single credential, but a credential can be used across multiple applications. Okay? I think that this is really going to take place when we look at state-issued media, commercially issued media that can be accepted for people for online transactions, for day-to-day business activities where people can authenticate and really do a number of these activities either online or the reduced time that it takes to do some of the personal interactions that they need to do now. Let me give you an example of some of the online transactions. If someone goes to get a service from a motor vehicle, you go to a government agency, federal, state, local, or even if you're going to a company, if you can reduce any of the in-person time to the time that's really necessary, well, if we can do those transactions online, it's going to make it better for you, it's going to make it easier for business, we're all going to reap the benefits of this. If we reduce the amount of information that we give about ourselves, or personal information, okay, because we can authenticate who we are, this whole rupture that we have now of PII information, the exposure of information, the marketing of your personal data, the availability of your personal data, that's really going to be addressed more when you can authenticate who you claim to be without really providing additional PII information for that exchange.